The world thought the Diddy case was over, that the final gavel had fallen and the storm had passed. But then out of nowhere, Cassie Ventura stepped back into the spotlight and everything changed again. Late last night, reports broke that Cassie had submitted new evidence to the Southern District of New York. Evidence that could not only reopen the case, but also dramatically increase Diddy's sentence. The same man who had just begun adjusting to life inside MDC Brooklyn might now face an entirely new nightmare. The whispers started small. A few legal insiders on social media are talking about sealed documents, new files, and unseen footage. But by sunrise, it was everywhere. Cassie's evidence was trending globally. Every major outlet at CNN, NBC, and even TMZ confirmed that Cassie's legal team had officially filed a supplemental statement with Judge Arun Subramanian's court, the same judge who handed Diddy his original sentence. Insiders are calling this a post-sentencing shockwave, one that could rewrite the ending everyone thought they already knew. Because remember, just days ago, Diddy's sentencing seemed final. A 50-month prison term, credit for time served, a $500,000 fine, and 5 years of supervised release. Judge Subramanian had said at the time, "A long sentence is necessary to send a message to those who abuse their power. But if these new claims prove valid, that message might be about to get even louder." Cassie's return has reopened old wounds and reignited the public's fury. The woman whose courage first cracked Diddy's empire is now shaking its foundations again. This time she's not speaking in interviews or through music. This time she's speaking through the law, through evidence that, if true, could send Diddy deeper into a prison cell than anyone imagined. Before we dive deeper into this explosive twist, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss any of our breaking updates as this story unfolds in real time. Now let's get back to it. As the night unfolded, sources close to Cassie's team confirmed what many feared, that this wasn't just an emotional statement or follow-up testimony. These were physical materials handed over under seal files, photos, and reportedly at least one recording that prosecutors never received during the initial trial. One insider described it as damning. Another said, "If the court accepts this, everything changes." The ripple effect was instant. Reporters swarmed the federal courthouse in Manhattan. Former federal prosecutors went live on air trying to predict the next step. And inside Diddy's circle, panic spread like wildfire. His lawyer, Mark Agnafo, reportedly called an emergency meeting before dawn, describing Cassie's move as an ambush. For the world, this was shocking. But for Cassie, it was personal. She had watched as Diddy's sentence was handed down and heard the critics say it was too light, too lenient. And now it seems she's decided to make sure justice isn't just spoken, it's served. The stage is set again in the same courtroom, the same city, under the same judge. But this time the stakes are even higher. The question isn't if Diddy will serve time. It's whether Cassie's new evidence will make him serve longer than anyone ever thought possible. And from the look of it, that answer might come sooner than he ever imagined. By morning, the courthouse in Lower Manhattan looked like a movie set. Reporters lined up outside the doors, microphones in hand, cameras flashing from every angle. Nobody could believe what they were hearing. Cassie Ventura had filed new evidence that could lead to a possible increase in Diddy's prison sentence. And this wasn't speculation anymore. This was official. SDNY had acknowledged receipt of the new submission. The moment that news broke, the internet went into meltdown. Inside sources told multiple networks that Cassie's new evidence wasn't just emotional testimony or recycled claims. It included digital records, undisclosed witness statements, and surveillance footage from the years of abuse she had described before. These files, according to insiders, had been in possession of a private investigator hired by Cassie's team, someone who had been quietly building this collection even before the original trial began. The gravity of it was unreal. Diddy's legal team had spent months trying to settle, trying to rebuild his public image after the verdict, even preparing to file an appeal. But now it all felt pointless. As soon as Judge Arun Subramanian confirmed that the new evidence would be reviewed, everything flipped upside down. For prosecutors, it was a second chance. For Diddy, it was a nightmare all over again. The media networks scrambled to get every detail. CNN ran the headline, "Cassie strikes again. New evidence could extend Diddy's sentence." TMZ called it the comeback nobody saw coming. And by noon, social media was a war zone. Some people accused Cassie of revenge. Others called her brave for refusing to let injustice stand. But there was one thing nobody could deny. Her timing was flawless, because just weeks earlier, Diddy's sentencing had divided the country. When he received just over 4 years in prison after prosecutors pushed for 11, critics said it was a slap on the wrist. Activists claimed it proved how power bends justice. Cassie's new filing was like a lightning strike, reopening that debate with double the intensity. Suddenly, every talk show, every podcast, every TikTok commentary was asking the same question. Is Diddy finally about to face real consequences? A journalist covering the case from inside SDNY described the atmosphere as tense but electric. Prosecutors were seen moving through the courthouse carrying thick folders, the same ones rumored to contain Cassie's files. Sources close to the case said one piece of evidence in particular stunned the court staff who previewed it under confidentiality. What it contained no one knew for sure, but whispers began spreading that it could prove long-term coercion and possibly tampering during the original proceedings. Meanwhile, in MDC Brooklyn, Diddy's demeanor reportedly changed overnight. Guards noticed he'd stopped his morning routines. He skipped meals. One insider said he looked worried for the first time. People who once called the trial a media circus were now calling it a second reckoning. This wasn't just Cassie reopening wounds. It was her reminding the system that the story wasn't finished. And through it all, the city buzzed with tension. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse holding signs that read, "No more deals and power doesn't mean freedom." Every headline, every tweet, every whisper built toward one question. What exactly was inside Cassie's evidence? And could it truly be enough to make Diddy's sentence jump from 4 years to 15? As night fell over Manhattan, one thing was clear. This wasn't a rumor anymore. The case that shook the music industry once was coming back from the dead. And this time it wasn't about fame or redemption. It was about reckoning. Inside the walls of MDC Brooklyn, Sean Diddy Combs sat in silence. The weight of the new headlines pressed down on him like the concrete around his cell. The whispers had reached even here. Guards discussing Cassie's filing under their breath. Inmates gossiping that Diddy's going back to court. For a man who once controlled entire industries, who could silence critics with a phone call, there was nothing left to control now. His world had shrunk to grey walls, steel doors in the echo of his own regrets. His lawyer, Mark Agnello, rushed to the detention center early that morning. Legal pad in hand, his face tight with panic. "They're reopening it," he said quietly through the glass. Cassie's team found something. Diddy leaned forward, eyes red from sleepless nights, his voice low. "What do you mean by found something?"
"It's done."
"It's over." Agnello hesitated before answering. "Not anymore." Those two words hit harder than any sentence ever could. Outside those walls, the story had already evolved into chaos. News vans surrounded the courthouse, crowds chanting Cassie's name. Commentators replayed her image from the original trial, calm, broken, and brave. "If she's coming back," one legal analyst said on CNN, "it means she believes there's unfinished business." And that's a bad sign for Diddy. Leaked reports claim that Cassie's team submitted digital evidence from hotel security archives linking timestamps to several previously dismissed witness statements. One of those witnesses, a former assistant, was rumored to have testified privately to federal agents. Her statement was sealed, but sources said it aligned perfectly with Cassie's new material. That alone made the judge take notice. For Judge Arun Subramanian, the situation was delicate. He had already ruled on the case that already stood in the national spotlight. To revisit sentencing would be unprecedented, but not impossible, especially if what Cassie's team claimed was true. Those new files proved acts of intimidation and obstruction during the original proceedings. Meanwhile, the prosecution was buzzing. For months, they'd accepted the verdict with quiet frustration. They wanted more time, a harsher outcome, but they followed the system. Now Cassie's evidence had given them what they secretly wished for, a second shot. One insider said prosecutors were calling this development Phase 2. Another insider said simply, "They're coming for him again." Diddy's defense tried to dismiss it all as publicity. "Cassie's doing this for attention," one of his reps told a reporter, but nobody was buying it. The tone of her legal filing, the coordination with SDNY, it all felt too real, too precise, too calculated. This wasn't revenge. This was reconstruction, rebuilding the case piece by piece until the truth could no longer hide behind money or fame. The pressure mounted when social media lit up with a leaked document from courthouse staff confirming a motion hearing request. The document's title read, "Motion to Reconsider Sentencing New Evidentiary Submissions." That one phrase was enough to send shockwaves across the internet. Influencers, journalists, and even lawyers outside the case began making predictions. Some said his sentence could double. Others whispered that federal prosecutors were considering new charges. Inside his cell, Diddy stared at the faint reflection in the steel mirror. The same man who once filled arenas is now fighting to keep his future from collapsing entirely. Every second dragged like an hour. He thought about Cassie, about the cameras, about the empire he'd built that was now crumbling in real time. And outside, the world waited. Cassie had stayed quiet since filing. No statements, no interviews, not even a social media post. That silence was louder than anything she could have said, because when Cassie moves quietly, the world knows something big is coming. And this time it wasn't just about justice. It was about the truth finally catching up to Sean Combs. One file, one witness, one courtroom at a time. The city felt different that morning. A grey mist hung over lower Manhattan, as if the air itself knew something massive was about to unfold. Outside the southern district of New York, the sidewalks were packed. Reporters, activists, and bystanders clutching their phones, waiting for updates that could rewrite the fate of one of the most powerful figures in entertainment. The energy was raw, electric, uneasy. Inside, the tension was even heavier. Federal agents moved through the marble hallways like shadows, carrying sealed folders marked confidential. Prosecutors whispered to one another, their faces grave. Somewhere inside those folders were Cassie Ventura's new submissions, the files that could extend Shah Diddy's sentence from a few years to a decade and a half. The world wanted to know what could possibly be inside those files. One leak hinted at digital communications, emails and voice messages, allegedly recorded years ago during Diddy's reign at the top. Others claimed Cassie's team had handed over security logs from a Miami hotel that contradicted Diddy's defense timeline from the trial. And the most shocking rumor of all was about a recorded call between a former employee and a fixer, allegedly hired to clean up situations before witnesses could speak. No one knew if it was authentic, but if it was, this case was about to become historic. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy had turned into chaos. Protesters held up signs that read, 15 years minimum, and money shouldn't save you. Some carried photos of Cassie during her early career days, calling her the voice of truth. For survivors everywhere, her move represented something bigger than one man. It was a message that power and fame could finally be challenged even after the verdict. As the hearing began, Judge Arun Subramanian entered the courtroom with the same composed calm that defined him through the entire Diddy trial. The air was thick. No cameras, no phones, just the scratching of pens from court reporters and the muffled rustle of papers. Cassie wasn't in the room, but her presence was everywhere. Every page of evidence, every hushed discussion carried her fingerprints. The prosecutors took the floor first. One of them, a veteran of the SDNY office, stood and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, the newly submitted materials raised serious questions about obstruction, intimidation, and coercion of witnesses. We believe these elements may warrant a reconsideration of Mr. Combs' sentencing term." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. That one sentence, reconsideration of sentencing, hit like thunder. Diddy sat quietly beside his attorney, his expression frozen, his hands locked together. Gone was the confidence he once carried like armor. This was a man who could feel the walls closing in. His lawyer, Mark Agnell, tried to argue that the so-called evidence was selective, outdated, and unreliable. But the judge's expression stayed neutral, cold. Outside, the news broke in real time. Live streams captured reactions from around the world. Hashtags exploded. Cassie returns justice for Cassie. Dear trouble again. The entire internet turned into a courtroom. Analysts compared the case to high-profile reopenings in federal history, calling it a defining moment for celebrity accountability. Some even speculated that if the evidence was strong enough, Diddy might face new federal charges under obstruction statutes. Meanwhile, Cassie's lawyer released a short statement that poured gasoline on the fire. We stand by the authenticity and relevance of our new submissions. This is not revenge. It's true, catching up. That single quote spread across the world. It was printed on headlines, shared on reels, and echoed on late-night talk shows. Everyone was talking about it, from legal experts to celebrities who once called Diddy a friend. For the first time since his sentencing, it felt like Diddy's story wasn't just about a fall from grace. It was about exposure. Layer by layer, the illusion of power was being stripped away, replaced by something much darker and far more real. By the time the sun began to set over New York, one thing was certain. Cassie had just shifted the entire balance of the case, and whether or not Diddy knew it yet, the storm she unleashed was only just beginning. It was supposed to be a review hearing, routine, procedural, maybe even symbolic. But what happened next turned the entire courtroom upside down. The prosecution had requested to play a short audio clip, claiming it was directly relevant to the reconsideration motion. Judge Arun Subramanian hesitated, looked at both sides, then nodded. "Proceed," he said. The lights dimmed slightly as the recording began. A faint click, then a man's voice, calm, confident, unmistakably Diddy's. "Make sure this doesn't reach Cassie," the voice said. "Handle it the way we always do." The room froze. Every single person inside the courtroom stopped breathing. The recording lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. When it ended, the silence was suffocating. Diddy's lawyer tried to speak, but his words stumbled. "That clip is heavily edited. Out of context," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. But it was too late. The damage was done. That one line was all the prosecution needed. They argued it wasn't about context, it was about pattern. The evidence, they said, showed years of manipulation, silencing, and power games designed to bury the truth. And now with this audio, the pattern was no longer hidden. It was recorded. Reporters inside the courthouse whispered frantically into their phones. No cameras were allowed, but descriptions of Did's reaction spread online within minutes. One journalist wrote, "He didn't blink. He just sat there staring straight ahead like a man watching his empire turn to dust." Judge Subramanian leaned forward, hands clasped. His tone turned heavier, colder. "Mr. Combs," he said slowly, "when this court issued your original sentence, it was under the belief that the evidence presented at trial reflected the full truth. What I've heard today forces me to reconsider that assumption." The courtroom was dead quiet except for the sound of paper shifting. You could feel the weight of the moment, the end of privilege, the collapse of reputation, the point where influence no longer mattered. The prosecutor stood again, steady and deliberate. "Your Honor, the government respectfully requests that the court extend Mr. Combs' sentence based on newly discovered evidence per U.S. Federal Rule 35 subsection A." Those legal words translated into one thing. More prison time. Agnew tried one last desperate defense. He called it a witch hunt. Accused Cassie's team of media manipulation. Said the clip was stolen, but the judge didn't flinch. He asked only one question. "Do you dispute that it's your client's voice?" Silence. Minutes later, Judge Subramanian began reading from his revised statement. His voice was controlled but firm. He cited the new materials, the severity of obstruction implications, and the undeniable breach of moral accountability. The decision was final. Given the weight of the evidence presented and the need to uphold the integrity of this court, the defendant's sentence is hereby increased to 180 months, 15 years, in federal custody. The words hit the room like an explosion. Gasps, cries, reporters rushed for the doors, trying to beat one another to the headline. Cassie's team exchanged quiet glances, some with tears in their eyes. The courtroom guards moved closer to Diddy as he sat motionless, his jaw clenched, eyes blank. For the man who had once ruled stages, owned skyscrapers, and shaped culture itself, it was over. 15 years, no more red carpets, no more music studios, just grey walls and time. Outside the courthouse, the world erupted. Crowds screamed as breaking news alerts lit up every screen. Diddy's sentence was extended to 15 years after new evidence from Cassie. Protesters cheered, fans cried. The nation watched the fall of a legend unfold in real time. And inside that courtroom, Judge Subramanian closed his folder, looked directly at Diddy, and said the words that would echo forever. "Power can delay justice, Mr. Combs, but it can't erase it." That was it. The moment the music stopped, the mask fell, and the truth finally claimed its victory. The sound of the gavel still echoed in everyone's ears, long after Judge Subramanian left the bench. The courtroom sat frozen, some in disbelief, others in tears, and many simply speechless. Diddy didn't move. His face was pale, almost expressionless, like someone who had finally realized there was no more running, no more deals, no more control. The same man who once stood untouchable now looked like a ghost of himself. In 15 years, those two words had stripped away decades of fame, money, and myth. Federal marshals stood quietly nearby as his lawyer leaned close, whispering something no one could hear. Diddy gave no reaction. Not anger, not shock, just silence. The silence of a man who had finally met the end of his illusion. Outside, the chaos was overwhelming. Helicopters hovered above the courthouse. Reporters yelled over one another. Social media exploded again. Hashtags like "Target Justice for Cassie" and "Target Diddy sentenced 15 years" dominated every platform. People across the world were watching history. Cassie herself was nowhere to be seen, but her voice echoed through every statement. Every cheer, every tear shed by survivors who finally felt heard. Inside the courtroom, the judge's final words lingered in the air. "Power can delay justice, Mr. Combs, but it cannot erase it." And that was it. The gavel fell. The myth ended. The truth stood tall. Diddy was escorted out through the side door, wrists bound, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Cameras flashed, trying to capture the last image of a fallen icon. A man who once ruled the world is now reduced to a case number. The streets of New York buzzed with disbelief. Some called it justice, others called it a tragedy. But everyone agreed on one thing. It was the end of an era, and somewhere far from the chaos, Cassie watched quietly, the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. She hadn't just spoken her truth, she had changed the course of history.